Oh, you don't know how good it is to see you again. Hi, I'm John Merriman, and this is your Tuesday morning guitar song. The city of New York has 5 boroughs. There's Manhattan, Bronx, Brooklyn, Queens, and Staten Island. Brooklyn and Queens sit on the other side of the East River from Manhattan. In Queens, there's a neighborhood called Forest Hill and a small elementary school called PS 164. In 1950, a young 4th grader by the name of Paul Simon was deeply and profoundly moved when he heard a classmate sing in a class play. It wasn't that he liked the singing so much, but he really liked the way the girls reacted to his classmate, and he knew right then that he wanted to be in show business. Oh, the classmate's name was Arthur Garfunkel. And Art only lived 3 blocks away from Paul, and Paul knew that if he wanted a girlfriend, somehow he was going to have to work with Artie. So they became best of buddies, and they both shared a love of the Everly Brothers. The Everly Brothers were all the rage back then with their close 2-part harmony. And Paul and Art knew if they could only sing in that close 2-part harmony, maybe they could go places someday. Maybe they could even end up singing for a class dance or something. Well, their first big break came when they sang together for the first time in 6th grade. It was for a class play that was presented to the whole school. It actually was an adaptation of Alice in Wonderland. But it was their first taste of stardom. Well, they're on to junior high, and their dreams didn't stop there. They got 3 of their friends together, formed a doo-wop group called the Peptones. And the Peptones soon went right to the top and fulfilled those dreams. They were singing for school dances. But Artie and Paul even saw a bigger horizon than this. They moved on to high school and they got $25 together of their own money, and that was a fortune back then for kids. They went over the 59th Street Bridge over to Manhattan, and they went to a recording studio and recorded a song that they had written together. It was called Hey Schoolgirl. And this is where things got very real for them. A man named Sid Prosen overheard them, and Sid owned a small record company in Manhattan. And he liked what he was hearing. So he convinced their parents into letting them enter into a record contract with his record label. It was called Big Records. And Sid had a lot of connections with New York radio stations, and he got this single, Hey Schoolgirl, played on New York radio. And soon this single became a national hit. It went up to number 49 on the Billboard charts. Sid gave his new duo a name. He named them Tom and Jerry, and that was the name they worked under in high school. So there they were, 2 15-year-old school kids with a national hit. They actually appeared on Dick Clark's American Bandstand, and on the same episode was Jerry Lee Lewis. You know, they often said in interviews it could get no better than being a high school kid with a national hit. Well, Sid tried a few more Tom and Jerry songs, but he couldn't get another hit. They were going nowhere, and Sid went bankrupt. And high school was just about over, so that was about it for Tom and Jerry. Art and Paul moved on to college, but they kept working part-time in the music business. They would go back over the 59th Street Bridge, take a crosstown bus to Broadway, and there they were, right near the Brill Building. And the Brill Building is where all the songwriters in the country worked. And for $15 a song, Art and Paul would record songwriter demos for them. But then the folk scene started happening in New York, and Paul and Art got very involved in this new thing called folk music. College was just about ending, and they formed their duo again, but they went by the name of Kane and Gar. And they started performing in clubs around Manhattan, folk clubs. Well, there they were overheard by a man named Tom Wilson, and Tom Wilson was a producer for Columbia Records in New York, and you can't get much bigger than that. Tom liked what he heard, and he offered them a live audition with Columbia Records, which they passed, and they were given a one-record deal with Columbia Records. And they decided to use their real name, Simon and Garfunkel. In 3 days, they recorded their first album for Columbia Records. It was called Wednesday Morning 3 a.m. It was released, and it immediately went nowhere. It was a failure. Didn't sell many copies, and our new duo, Simon and Garfunkel, were very disappointed. Plus, they were not getting along. They were quarreling and squabbling all the time, and they decided to call it quits and break up. Paul headed to England, where he decided to check out the club scene for folk music, and Artie stayed in New York. Well, Tom Wilson really believed in the boys, and he didn't want to see it end like that. So he took one of the songs from this album. He added a rhythm section to it, an electric guitar, an electric bass, and he turned it into a folk rock single. The song was Sounds of Silence, and he convinced Columbia Records to re-release it as a single. When he did, the folk rock boom was just happening. This song hit just at the right time, and boom, it went to #1 on the national US chart. Paul just happened to be coming back from England that time, and he was notified when he got off the plane that he had a #1 hit with a band that didn't exist and with a partner he didn't want to work with anymore. Well, you can't turn your back on something like this. So Art and Paul reformed Simon and Garfunkel, and of course the rest is history. They produced 4 more studio albums as Simon and Garfunkel. The music of Simon and Garfunkel is burned into the heart of a generation. It was the backdrop, it was the soundtrack to the latter part of the 1960s. All the hopes, the dreams, the joys, and the pains, it reflected them all and fit perfectly with the emotions of the 1960s, and will never, ever be forgotten by that generation. Simon and Garfunkel, after 1970, had some reunion tours and lots of reunion gigs. But according to what they're saying today, there probably will not be another reunion for Simon and Garfunkel. Well, that's a pretty serious statement, so I think we need to lighten it up a bit. So, how about a Tuesday morning fun fact? Here's your Tuesday morning fun fact. Paul Simon and Art Garfunkel have to be about the brainiest pop stars ever. While they were performing as Simon and Garfunkel, Art Garfunkel got his BA degree in art history and his master's degree and completed all his coursework for his doctoral degree in mathematics education from Columbia University. Paul Simon got his BA degree in English literature and attended Brooklyn Law School. Again, all while performing as Simon and Garfunkel. Here's your fun fact. In 1970, when Simon and Garfunkel broke up, Art Garfunkel went back and became a high school English teacher. It took place in Connecticut at Litchfield Private School. He only lasted 2 years because every time he asked the students, "Do you have any questions?" they would say things like, "How are the Beatles?" It just wasn't working out. Art, you could never go home again. You should know that. And that's your Tuesday morning fun fact. 1970, I have a guitar song for you from the album Bridge Over Troubled Waters. Please stay with me. I'll be right back. Thank you so much. Share the show, like the show, find reasons to like each other, try to think good thoughts this week, come back and see me, and remember, you're never ready for your day without a song in your heart. Bye now.